Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Project Reclass Hackday, excuse me. I'm the co-founder. My name is Tay, and we all want to the volunteers. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. And we would like to get started. We have 4 different branches, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about all of them throughout the day, as well as the values that we at Project Reclass live by. If you want to, you can deep dive into one of 2 tracks, the technology track at 2 p.m. or the vision track. In the technology track, we'll be having live demos by the development team, as well as a series of lightning talks on what we learned this summer. In the vision track, we are going to have presentations from the research team and from the social media team, as well as a workshop on what we want to do moving forward. We'll close with a panel, which is going to be very incredible. You should all come, and we'll be talking with many panelists who are at the intersection of several of the domains that we work in. And at the end, we'll let you know how, if you want to get involved in the fall, you can get involved. Okay, so for this track, we are going to be talking about how Project Reclass was founded, deep dive a little bit into what are the things we're working with, both conceptually and what we've done within prisons already. And then we are going to close out with what the technology team has built out this summer. All right. So a little about myself. I am a software engineer in New York City. I've been working for about 5 years. And women in tech has actually been a topic that's been very near and dear to my heart. And the reason is that, as you can see on the left, this is a panel that we hosted at Bloomberg on initiating change. So we had several women with a very long decades of experience in the technology industry talking about the challenges they faced with culture as well as being a woman. And events like this are really inspirational, especially if you are part of a marginalized population, simply because you don't feel alone anymore, you have role models. And I really saw the effects that grassroots diversity efforts could have on my personal career, as well as many others. Photo at the bottom, we had a weekly study session. Aram is actually in this photo. She's one of the volunteers here at Reclass. We organized a lot of events together. We wanted to learn tech outside of work, and the reason is because if you want to keep up with the technology industry, you really do have to keep studying on your own. And it's much easier when you have friends. And on the right is a women's hackathon that we were recruiting at in my second job. Another big thing that I was exposed to at Bloomberg is philanthropy, specifically related to veterans. One of the leaders of Bloomberg LP, Tom Secunda, is a huge supporter of veterans. So we would write cards to service members during the holidays because they may not be home. And we would also have fairly large events on Veterans Day. And this one, we actually got to see a play read out by some voice actors. But one thing I noticed was that at all these events, there wasn't very many veterans themselves. I find it very rare that I meet someone in technology who has served in our military. So that kind of made me think about this topic a little more. I'm also a volunteer NYPD police officer. We do unarmed patrols of the community, as well as help out at street fairs, parades, traffic control, and just engaging with the community, trying to improve the relationship. And this experience brought to me a sense of responsibility and also a sense of purpose. And so all of these things had exposed me to the topic of veterans and diversity in tech. So when Kunal came to me with an idea, I really wanted to get on board. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Kunal to talk about how West Point has shaped his vision for Project Reclass.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kunal Jha. I am currently an Army officer in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And previous to this, I have been in Korea and Fort Benning but my formative experiences really stem back to my time at West Point. So I want to start first off with this photo. This is one of the best summers I had at West Point when I was a West Point cadre, where I was in charge of mentoring and developing 9 freshmen into new cadets and then becoming full cadets. And this is at the end of a 12-mile ruck march. So we had just hiked all the way through West Point to get back to the main area. And we were celebrating the fact that we were about to have a huge accomplishment. And West Point is a very rigorous and difficult institution. And what they're very well known for is they have a very strict honor code. So while I was at West Point, I committed an honor violation when I was writing a paper. I didn't properly cite my sources. I pulled information from different sites, didn't cite it. And my teacher pulled me in. He said, I want to pull you before the honor committee. So I remember talking with these individuals right here. They were freshmen that looked up to me. And when I told them that I had an honor violation, it was one of the hardest decisions I had to come to and tell them about. So part of that punishment for what I did was they decided to hold me back. So the rest of my class got to graduate, but I spent more time at West Point. So next slide. During that extra semester I was at West Point, one of my instructors, who will later be speaking at our panel, brought my entire political science class to a prison that had a partnership with Bard College. It's called the Bard Prison Initiative. And when I walked in, I was astounded at how rigorous and committed the prisoners were to the academics they were taking, similar to how we were at West Point. They were going at it, they wanted to learn and better themselves. And what also struck me was when they noticed I had bare sleeves, but all my other classmates had rank on their sleeves, they saw that I was a marked individual, just like they were. And we had a conversation about how once you get out of prison, it's very hard to shake that stigma, and oftentimes even apply to jobs. There's many barriers to entry. So working with Captain Archuleta, now Major Archuleta, he exposed me to how there is a huge need for education in prisons. And Bard was working with a few prisons. There was a spattering of them around the nation, but working with other soldiers made me realize I wanted to do something greater and wanted to get more involvement for the veterans who are in prison. Next slide. So I was able to graduate in December 2016. This was a small graduation with 16 individuals. The summer, when you have the normal graduation, there's 950, there's a band, there's the vice president who was there. It was a huge affair. My graduation was much more muted, and I went off to Korea and served there from 2017 to 2018. And while I was there, I was exposed to cyber warfare, I was exposed to artillery, and it made me realize that there's a whole world outside of what I just seen at West Point. But I also was able to understand that we put a lot of expectations on our soldiers. We want them to become citizen soldiers and then become experts at their craft. And we do a lot of good training. And I wanted to see how we could help soldiers who have left the service and have found themselves in prison to work with them and find a way to train them the same way I was about to retrain myself. So next slide. So the vision I had was when I was in Korea, I knew I wanted to transfer branches. I wanted to go from being an artillery officer to becoming a cyber officer. And in the Army, that's called reclassing. You're reclassifying your military specialty. So at Project Reclass, we believe that investing up front in individuals working towards financial independence makes enduring improvements in our community. So by investing while someone is incarcerated, while they have the time, while they have the motivation, they have the resources, if we work with them once they get out, it's much less likely that they'll be brought back into prison. And one of our speakers later on, Mr. Foringer, will be able to speak about how he saw former incarcerated individuals, once they embraced an idea of change and how to get an education plan, they would not go back to prison. And that's why we want to help provide the resources for those who want to take it and go with it. Next slide. So mission. In the Army, you have mission statements. They direct everything that happens within the organization. So for our mission statement, Project Reclass develops technical vocational skills in incarcerated veterans striving for upward mobility upon reentry to society. So within the United States, there's several different veteran-specific programs where you have veteran courts, you have veteran wings in prisons, We have a lot of these resources so that if veterans are willing to work and they want to continue to strive for more, we want to give them the tools so that they can do it. And that's something that ToyNet is going to be demonstrating later on in today's brief. Next slide. So recidivism, this is something that's key. 95% of incarcerated individuals eventually rejoin society. So if you are incarcerated, there is a 95% chance you will be released within your lifetime. So these people we are currently locking up are having a break in their employment history, and then they will be released. But the problem is that break in employment history and that lack of training that's currently going on in prisons leads to the majority of them getting rearrested. So these statistics from 2005 demonstrate just how likely it is for someone to go back into prison once they are released. Next slide. So the Rand Corporation did a study trying to see how much would education change that statistic about recidivism. And they found out that 43% of people who are involved in education are less likely to return to prison. And 13 are more likely to be employed post-release. So a lot of these educational opportunities are what Bard and other colleges are offering. They're offering employment, they're offering job training, they're offering skill-based degrees so that when they get out, they aren't just having a gap in employment history, they have a marketable skill that will get them employed. Here's some legislation that just dictates how the United States has been on this gradual bend, trying to bring higher education into prisons. And it all stems back to the 1960s. And even today, we now have the ability for people who are incarcerated to take advantage of the Pell Grant and have institutions like Bard College, or even ones here in Georgia, local colleges, come in and offer classes in everything from English to literature, computer science, mathematics, everything under the sun. Next slide. That's where the Pell Grants come in. The Pell Grant Second Chance from 2016 was a way to open up the opportunity to have college education in prison. The problem with this now is since COVID-19, even the Bar Prison Initiative has been shut down within prisons because of how high of a rate of contagious spread prisons present to their populations because of the close quarters, the shared living arrangements, the shared food, everything makes it more prone for an outbreak to happen in prisons. So every college across the country has suspended their training. And that's where we want to help with that, overcoming the challenges that COVID-19 has presented with a technologically driven solution. Next slide. Prison education. Re-education costs the participants not participating in the institution far more than it does cost the educational institution. If we were to look at this slide, if you were to be involved in a educational program and then were released, you're far more likely not to return. So therefore, that upfront investment is saving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in reincarceration costs. So that bottom number shows you've now put up that money up front. These individuals don't return. The top money just shows nothing was done. Those people returned into society. They were unable to re-enter and they were brought back in. Next slide. So we are trying to enter into a field that we are not alone. There is a lot of motivation to change aspects of criminal justice reform and the prison process in the United States. And here's a few of the main big players in the sphere. Next slide. But the Bar Prison Initiative is something I would like to just talk a little bit about because of my experience working with them. They are known from a Ken Burns documentary that highlights how they go into prison and how they prepare people to return. And they have trained hundreds of individuals, and their goal is to prepare them for re-entry. So when I was in the prison in upstate New York, many of the prisoners were from the Bronx, from Queens, from Brooklyn, and had short sentences. They were there for about 4, and the longest I remember was 8 years. They were there for a litany of offenses, from petty crime to drug usage, and all of them were nonviolent offenders that were eagerly learning the material that we were there to help them with. Some of us are helping them with math, some of them are helping them with history assignments, some of them are helping with English, but they were using the resources available to prepare themselves for reentry. Next slide. Veterans. So the United States has a 1% population of, or 1% of the population has served, 7% has been involved in the military, but out of that, almost 10% of the US prison population is former veterans, which is enormous when you think about how, as a percentage, we are not that high. Across the nation, they have veteran-specific dorms, and I was able to work with one of them in Rutledge. Next slide. Here just gives, when you go into the vision slides, we'll be able to talk more about what some of these programs are trying to do and how there is veteran-focused goals on bringing people who have served back into society. So how are we different? We are not tied to a particular institution. We are not tied with Bard. We're not tied with any Georgia colleges. We are our own institution, our own organization that wants to work with prisons to help provide educational training. We want to teach technology. We have a scalable lesson plans and tools, and you'll be able to see that later on in this brief when we talk about ToyNet. So Rutledge State Prison, next slide. After I was stationed in Korea, I was stationed at Fort Benning, the home of the infantry. And while I was there, up the road, there is a state prison, which is a minimum security or medium security prison, where they offer job training from everything relating to barbershop, carpentry, and you can see other skills that were offered there. But what they're known for is having a veterans dorm. And that's where they would place everyone from the Air Force, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, and Navy. So they were able to live separately and were afforded more privileges. And one of the privileges was, next slide, the ability for us to teach with them. When we first went in to teach with them, we told them we were using a Network Plus book and another networking book. They then went to the warden, and because of their privileged access, were able to order the book through the prison system. And that showed their dedication to what we wanted to teach them. They wanted to continue the lessons, even though I only could go in once a week. And here's some of the slides we were producing. We did games, we did labs, we did practice exams, all to help them gain the material. Next slide. But every lesson would start with a value. The Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, all service branches are rooted in values they instill in basic training and in the formative experiences of their recruits. And that sticks with them throughout their entire experience. West Point was duty, honor, and country. Those are the three values we were always emblazoned on every surface, on every plate. You would always see these kind of reminders of that's why you are here. So I work with them, and I always make sure that our first slide, and even in our general meetings, we always are grounded in one of our virtues. And the 10th one that Tay and I added was grit, because that is something that people exiting prison, people making a career change, whatever it may be, have to have grit to go through the process. And that will now turn it back to Tay.
Yes. So as Kunal said, we cannot enter prisons and do the classroom setting that we used to do. We used to have 20 students at Rutledge, and we would meet maybe once a week, every other week, cover a few curriculum pieces that I wrote. Kunal was primarily teaching. And as COVID moved on, we realized this is lasting a while, and likely prisons are one of the last places to open up. So we started thinking, how can we pivot so that we can remain in contact with them, but not have to worry about spreading viruses within the prison? And well, I'm a software engineer. We know a lot of software engineers. So we thought, hey, can technology help us solve this? But as we move into the technology space, one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that just because you code something doesn't mean it's going to make an impact. So how do we make sure that the things we're making resonate with them, teach them something that they value, and stick with them? So we did feedback of all of our students. They filled out a form. Some of it was numerical. Some of it was free form, and we tried to figure out what were the things we were most effective at, what we could improve. Everybody was intellectually stimulated. They felt that they were able to contribute, and that was meaningful to them. And in terms of the curriculum, it seemed that there was a little bit more we can do, and communication skills, we might not have been developing them as much as we had thought. Again, there was multiple people who came up to us and said they just love to get to speak out about these topics because it's interesting, exciting. I went there once. We ran a lab where we brought in these little switches and router printouts because we can't actually take devices in. And we had them under a budget plan out what kind of network they were going to lay out for a hospital on a base, how much wire they needed to purchase to reach to the ISP backbone that we were going to source the internet from. They're all very diligent. I was very excited to work with them, and they want more. They want more support than what they're getting in the classroom. They talk about it throughout the week. Everyone either participates by sharing the knowledge they already have from their time in service, or asking questions if they aren't ready to contribute at a knowledge level. One other thing that we got a lot of was, don't give up, even if some people will tell you that this isn't important, it's really important to us. And we really appreciate that the language you speak is familiar to all of us. And that was very encouraging to see that the way we were designing the curriculum was resonating. So as I said, we can't go in. Additionally, even when we could go in, we can't take in any hardware. We can't connect to the internet. And that is sort of a big problem when it comes to teaching networks, because one of the first things you learn is the ping command, where you try to contact a machine far out into the internet and see it come back with a response. If they can't practice those basic system administration skills, it is very hard for all of this to be intuitive. So in July, we got a group of friends together who invited other friends, and we started becoming a big team to talk about what it is that we can build this summer. We brought up a few bios of potential users. Of course, there is the mission statement, a vocational program within prisons, specifically for veterans. But we also said, well, this tool isn't specific to prisons. Maybe we can share it with all veterans. And you know what? Maybe we can even share it in universities. As long as the people find it intuitive, this can be used anywhere. Then we scoped back that problem to two individual profiles that we felt we could address and were a priority, which was a member from the veteran and tech community, as well as somebody within our vocational program. So we built out these profiles a little more. Steve, you can imagine him to be 35. He's serving 2 years in Augusta State Prison for a DUI. He is a hard worker. He worked up to being a supervisor and kept that job for quite a while. He just, made a mistake. And he served 8 years in combat arms. He wants the ability to hide the network image that he's working with so that he can test his skills. And he also needs very clear error messages because he doesn't yet have the experience in networks to know what he did wrong without support from the platform. The other profile we made was Cassie. She has gotten out and she has a doer attitude. She loves learning new things. She found out about cybersecurity at an info session and she's trying to get a certification. Because she's studying on her own at home, she would like the ability to sort of level up and have the platform give her a sense of progress as she's working that we may not expect to need in a classroom setting. And she wants to be challenged. Okay, so the engineers actually got together week one and put together some wireframes of what we envisioned the platform to be. And it was very different actually from what I had in mind. If you come to technology track, you'll see a little bit of some of the very, very primitive wireframes that I created. What everyone wanted was a lot more robust because it turns out that when I learned computer science back in college, there weren't all of these different platforms available to learn, but industry has made a lot of progress in terms of ways to make concepts intuitive, technical concepts intuitive to students. So I was like, this is what Design Week is for, let's roll with it. So from the sketches, I used PowerPoint to create these very basic wireframes. You'd have some splash screen, it'll be incredible, everyone will want to use the tool. When you click in, you have a screen where you can pick what module you want to work on, it'll tell you the progress of it. And then the main technology that we'll demo in a second is the emulator that allows you to create network topologies and then run commands on them. From there, we did a engineering design session where we talked about the frameworks that we want to use, how the different components are going to communicate with each other, the APIs we want to expose from the back end, and what kind of libraries we're going to use. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Scott to introduce himself and then give a live demo of the Toynet platform.